Hello and welcome to Talking Politics. Today we'll be looking at what it takes for Christians to be actively involved in politics. You're very welcome. And I have today with me in the studio a very important guest. Gareth Wallace is the Executive Director of the Conservative Christian Fellowship. Gareth, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Let's look at some of the things you've done. And prior to leading the CCF, you worked mainly in the Christian charity sector, lobbying on matters concerning social engagement, religious liberty and poverty alleviation, and your previous role was policy advisor for the Salvation Army.
That's right, yes.
And how has it been at CCF?
Well, it's a fantastic privilege and opportunity to be the director of the Conservative Christian Fellowship. I've been there for 1 year and I think 3 months now. And as you say, before that, I lobbied for a series of charities and churches, most recently with the Salvation Army, where I was particularly looking at issues like homelessness, gambling and unemployment. And originally I grew up in Northern Ireland and took a keen interest in Westminster politics, studied politics in London, and I worked for an MP and for a government department before I took up my series of jobs in the charity sector.
Interesting. So you have lots of experience when it comes to politics.
Well, I think what I've learned is perhaps a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, and the deeper you go into politics, you realise it travels very fast. And yeah, I think wisdom is key.
Wisdom is key. I like that. Well, recently I had an interview with Michael Ware, the former faith advisor to ex-President Barack Obama. Let's watch this clip. Hello and welcome to Talking Politics on Love World TV. Today we'll be talking about Christians' engagement in politics, and I'm here with Michael Ware, who is the former faith advisor to ex-President Obama. Michael, you're very welcome to this program.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you. One of the most resounding statements I've heard you say today is that Christians are not Christians enough when it comes to politics. Now tell us, what do you mean by that?
No, Christians have unique resources to engage in politics, and not just for their own interest, but for the interest of others. We have the ability to not be sort of striving for security in politics because our security is in Christ. And yet, too often, Christians engage in politics just like everybody else, when what we're called to be is salt and light. And so one of my messages to Christians is that you could actually bring your faith with you, with the commitments, the obligations, and the resources it provides for your personal relationships, to your spiritual growth, and you could actually bring that into politics and pursue faithfulness in politics in a way that could be edifying to your community. And what a gift that would be to our neighbors.
And that's what you've not found in most Christians on both sides of the Atlantic.
Well, you know, I want to make. I think what's clear is that certainly there's been a lack of consistency, and certainly depending on the context we're thinking about, certainly Christians have pursued self-interest at times, prioritizing that over the common good. And so I don't know if I'd say most Christians, but certainly this is a question for individual believers, for individual folks in your audience, to be thinking about the way that they view politics and how they vote, the issues that they care about, and if those issues, if their vote is tied not just to their wallet or to their personal interest, but to the interests of the community around them.
Before the age of 21, you found yourself deep in the White House, deep in politics, and here you are, a Christian, very committed. How did you balance your faith with the everyday issues you had to deal with in the White House?
Yeah, well, it was important to, when I first started at the White House, I was concerned that because I would be so busy, that I wouldn't find time to read scripture, to be in the Word. What I found was that the pressure of the job and the structure of it, the fact that I knew that if I didn't schedule time and set aside time for the Lord, that I just want to be able to sort of find it, it wouldn't just kind of come to me. I found that my time in the White House was among the most spiritually disciplined times that I've had in my walk. So that was important, to stay in the Word, to stay in community with fellow believers. Oftentimes politics can be isolating, and you could find your community in those who agree with you politically and not those who are part of the body of Christ. And so it was important to stay in community. And so all those things were important to me. And just to keep a perspective, that as important as the work that happens at the White House is, that politics is not ultimate. And that helped me, I think, navigate my days and approach things with a healthier sense of identity. Yeah.
And you said Christians going into politics should not find themselves deeply rooted in politics. Their faith should be deeply rooted in the gospel.
Yeah.
Before getting engaged in politics.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What message do you have for Christians who are saying, I'm young, I want to go into politics, but I really don't know how to put forward my agenda when I get there?
Yeah. Well, a few things. One is to attach your aspirations and attach your involvement to institutions and organizations that are already doing it. You don't need to start your own thing. You don't need to do it alone. One of the best ways you could use your influence is to throw it behind organizations and leaders that are doing things the way you want to see them done. And so that would be my first encouragement and advice. And then I'd also say your unique voice is important, and we don't engage in politics for victory. We engage in politics to be faithful, and so we don't get discouraged when things don't go our way. We stay in the game, we stay in the arena, because we're not there because we want our team to win. We're there to love our neighbors. And if one decision doesn't go our way, then we move on to the next one and think about how the next decision, our city or our country or our, the voting body that we're participating in, we think about the best way for our community to proceed in that decision, and we advocate for that.
What about pastors and church leaders who really want to encourage their members to go into politics?
Yeah, well, pastors can play a role principally in making sure that their congregants understand that you don't need to and you can't cordon off your faith from your politics. In other words, you can bring the confidence that you have in Christ into politics in a way that is edifying for all people. So again, we don't advocate in politics just for ourselves, just for Christians, just for those who are part of our tribe or our family or those in our line of work, but we can bring commitment to justice and mercy and compassion, and that those things don't need to set apart just for our personal and private lives. Those are things that could be brought into politics as well.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
Your book, Reclaiming Hope, talks about your experience in the White House. Would you like our people to get?
Yes, absolutely. It's available now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Great.
Michael Weir, the former faith advisor to ex-President Barack Obama. Gareth, let's take a look at some of the things he said. He said Christians should bring their faith into politics because they have unique resources. So what are these unique resources and qualities he's talking about?
Well, as you will have heard from Michael, it would be easy to think that politics is about being incredibly articulate, intelligent and charming, and Michael is all those things. But I'd want to give encouragement to each and every one of us that we too can make a difference in politics. I think the most important thing, of course, is that we share a Christian faith, and we believe that God's our creator, that Jesus died for us, and that we are called to live transformational lives out in the world. And as a Christian involved in politics, like Michael, I believe that we can make a positive impact based on our Christian viewpoint in society. That's not about imposing our faith on others. We live in a plural democracy, but it's about being honest with ourselves and with wider society about the positives that we think our worldview, our Christian worldview, brings. So faith would be the first point. The second point I'd bring is fellowship. Again, someone like Michael seems incredibly articulate and very gifted, and you think of heroes of faith in the past like Wilberforce, or amazing Christian MPs in the present like Fiona Bruce. But I'm sure they'd be the first to say that the most important thing for them is a sense of fellowship, that there's support, accountability, training, good theology, prayers of their local church congregation, good Christian friendships they can trust, accountability, and also their relationship with their constituents and with the people they're talking to. And I think the final point that links into that is family. And by that, I don't just mean the Christian family, I do mean wider society. So it's really important that we're seen as serving wider society and really seeking to make an impact and a difference, because if Christianity is anything, it's about the church, and we as members of the church, it's our service back to our local communities.
So we're looking at service back to the local communities, we're looking at honesty in politics, we're looking at faithfulness when it comes to politics, and these are qualities that Christians can't bring into politics.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the most important points that Michael made was that where is our hope? He's talking about reclaiming hope, and I think that the danger of politics is people could put their faith in the politics itself, and maybe there's a temptation for ego or ambition, and again the risk perhaps of being a very gifted person who wants to make a difference. But as a Christian, I want to be humble about my own flaws and weaknesses, and I want to place my feet in my faith and have my trust there, and then put my hands to service. And for some, that I believe will be a calling to politics. For others, it might be a calling into business. We're here on television. For others, it might be a calling into the media. So I think we're called to put our hands into action in different realms of society. But where our feet are, that should be rooted in our faith and in our commitment.
Let's look at the pressure Christians in politics and in the civil service face already, because oftentimes politics can be isolating. And that's one of the things Michael mentioned about working in the White House with the everyday pressure and the circumstances and the influence around him, but he still remained a committed Christian.
Absolutely. I'm just reflecting, I'm smiling because I was reflecting with a friend over the weekend who's just written a paper on King David. And that's one example of a political leader from the Bible that our leadership program, our impact course, look at. And of course, King David was regarded as a great statesperson, a leader who grew Israel above and beyond in terms of power and influence than it had ever been before. But a man with great moral flaws and who sinned in a terrible way. And I think the crucial thing is that we serve humbly, and that we don't in any way claim that we are better than other people. It's because we feel we have received grace from God that we are called to serve others. And I think that for me is the starting point of Christian service. And I can see that in the humility and the servant-heartedness of many Christian MPs. And I'm certain that many of your viewers, when they've actually met with a politician, have often been impressed with their sense of service, perhaps in a way that isn't always reflected with a negative view of politicians that's maybe more commonly held.
Let's look at Christians then, actively involved in politics. How can they put forward their agenda for the communities they represent, or as Christians?
I think for Christians, again, they need to be really rooted in their own faith, in good theology, and in being very practical about how they can help influence the world around them. Again, we live in a plural society. It's not about imposing our view on other people, but at the same time, there are competing worldviews, many of which are well-intentioned, but are off the view that, for example, religion might be harmful. So people who take that view may have decided that influencing education policy or influencing media output or influencing the kinds of legislation that gets encouraged within political parties and then in Parliament, that those influences are, for them, what they want to achieve. And unless Christians mobilise and are thoughtful and are strategic and seek the welfare of the city, to quote the title of an article that I had to write recently, unless they are there as part of that debate in the public square, saying that Christian values and viewpoints are equally valid and can also be put out for public debate and help influence the personal values of individual politicians, but also that Christian principles can help influence national policies. Let's use an example. So our current Prime Minister, Theresa May, is a Christian, has been a member of our local church for over 20 years, and was an extremely successful Home Secretary in this country. And of course that was
she was the daughter of a pastor.
And the daughter of a pastor, but was never very public about how her faith exactly intersected with politics, except by her actions. You know, by your fruits you shall know them, is the Bible verse. She is extremely proud of her work on modern slavery and her legislation on human trafficking, and she has stated that her passion for that is linked to her faith position. And again, we can link that back to the work of the great reformers, and indeed the work right now of Christian charities and community groups. One final point on that. I think the risk, the danger, is that people think, great, let's be a public Christian, let's go out, let's sign lots of petitions, let's get involved. That's one side of the coin. That's great. That's what I did as a charity lobbyist. The other side of the coin is, who is going to spend 10 years, maybe more, knocking on doors, building up a political network, sacrificing time and money to go and campaign, maybe as a local councillor, then maybe as an MP. It takes a long time to get into politics. And just the final example, so I get to host a monthly prayer service in Parliament. And I remember last year the huge privilege of having there the head of several different Christian prison ministries that do incredible work with former prisoners, but also the then Minister for Prisons, Andrew Selous, who's a Christian MP. And the fact that the person making the decisions around prison policy was a Christian, that did not happen overnight. That was because he was the right person in the right place at the right time, because he decided that he had a calling to politics many, many years before. So I think for Christians, a calling to the public square, to public life, can take many forms. It's about being an active citizen. It's about signing those petitions and getting involved in campaigns. But for some, it's actually thinking about, could I be the next elected representative for my area? And not to rule that out, or not to think that they would not be capable of doing that, because I know there are people watching this right now, and it might surprise them, but in 10 years' time, they could well be a Member of Parliament.
That's it, it could well be a Member of Parliament. So it's not just about being on the sidelines shouting, it's actually being there as well, planning to be there and being actively involved to take the right decisions. As you said, being in the right place at the right time for the right purpose.
Absolutely, and I think what I want to really encourage, and our leadership programme, the Conservative Christian Fellowship's Impact course is now accepting applications for this coming year. I don't just want to support and praise the work of the MPs who are sitting in Parliament right now. They are amazing. They are my mentors, my heroes. I'm still, I feel anyway, relatively young. My question to your viewers is, who's going to lead my country when I'm older? Let's think 20, 30, 40 years' time. And more than that, who's going to be leading the church? And is the church going to be teaching a theology of engagement with society? Who's going to be encouraging and praying and supporting our national leaders in 20, 30, 40 years' time? who's going to be leading these charities that are going to be doing this public campaigning work? So all of these things can either be done not so well in the future, or they could be done even better in the future. So I think my ambition is what's going to happen for the next generation, not just what's going to happen in the next Parliament.
What's going to happen for the next generation? And that takes us to what exactly CCF doing right now to encourage our people out there and Christians to be actively involved in politics.
Again, I'd come back to our leadership programme, to our impact course, and what's been really encouraging with this year's intake is the number of individuals in that who are interested in elected politics. But I'd link back to things that other charities are doing as well. So for example, CARE, they run a intern programme alongside Christian MPs of all parties. And I was just chatting with a friend last night who is now in a very senior role in a media company, and he hasn't gone down the road of elected politics. But because he worked for an MP, he will understand the pressures, both the family pressures, the policy pressures, the faith pressures on a Christian MP in a way that nothing else would have prepared him for. So my guess is that now when he sits around the table in his TV company and they say, so what about politics? Or what about Christians in politics? There is now a Christian around that table who's not just a Christian thinking about the media, but they're a Christian in the media who has a knowledge about politics. So I'm unashamedly passionate about political engagement, but I think my desire is that each individual Christian finds what they're passionate about, and whatever area of excellence they've been called to, that they seek out the right career, the right relationships, the right mentoring, the right support in order that they can achieve all that they could and reach their full potential.
Britain has a Christian heritage, so how much are Christians required in today's Britain, and what should they be doing right now?
I think the last time I was on, I mentioned the Speak Up booklet, and I believe you've had Simon on from the Evangelical Alliance to talk about that. And I used to work at the Evangelical Alliance, and I think they strike the right balance in tone between not being unduly concerned about things that may not actually happen versus not simply trying to agree with things to have an easy life. I think there's a tension there between evaluating how urgent an issue is about speaking about your faith in public or about any potential changes in law. There's an issue about prioritising which battles to fight and when. And I think a lot of Christian MPs have become extremely wise about how they articulate that. And I think that the risk with campaigning sometimes is that campaigning has to be urgent. That's its role, and that's right. But I think we need to weigh up very carefully how we prioritise which issues, which organisations, which petitions we sign or endorse. So I'd certainly commend the EA Speak Up resource as a way of explaining how the law is at the minute with regard to being able to talk about your faith publicly. I think it's not as serious as some people might fear, but it's not as innocent as some people pretend. So there are issues of concern, and it's always something that needs to be watched. And each individual case that comes up that maybe hits the headlines, people should read up on it and read around it and try and see, is this something that is a genuine issue of concern? And if so, what is my best and most gracious but most determinedly effective way of engaging either with the media or with the politicians to allow Christians to be themselves in the public square? I think you hear arguments from both sides. If I can just add one more example. I think sometimes it might be easier for Christian politicians because you are standing as a citizen, and it's warts and all, as many people know. And if you put yourself forward on a ballot paper, your opponents will research everything about you. But it also gives you the opportunity to be very honest with the public. And many Christian MPs will say, look, I'm here to represent my constituents. There are some issues I might vote on my Christian conscience on. There's some issues you might disagree with me on, and they can be quite open about that. So they almost have a remit to be a public Christian in some way in Parliament. And many of the votes, like on matters of life issues, are conscience votes. So there's no party whipping, it's called. There's no forced vote or encouraged vote one way or the other. For my Christian friends who might be working in the civil service, it might be slightly different because they're implementing what the government is choosing. So I know, for example, concerns were raised around the issue of potential registration of Sunday schools. This was ostensibly to tackle extremism. So Christian MPs will probably be making representations on that and saying, I think we can allay your concerns. Obviously, if you're working within the education system as a civil servant, you wouldn't be able to articulate your concerns in the same way, and maybe quite rightly. So as an example, I think it might actually be harder at the minute to be a Christian civil servant because you have to follow the line of policy that's happening, whereas the role of a legislator, the role of a politician is slightly different in that you're challenging what the government do, or you're challenging the rightness of a government policy. So I think there's a subtle distinction there, and we maybe need to bear with each other about actually what you are or aren't allowed to do in individual jobs. But I think that for many Christians, they hear something on the news, but it might not actually be that way in their office. And I think many of your viewers will have examples where they've been able to be very obvious in their faith, in their work surroundings, and have been able to be a real support to people who they work with and serve.
Thank you very much, Gareth. It's wonderful to have you on this program, Talking Politics, and we look forward to having you again.
Thank you.
Well, viewers, this is Talking Politics, and here with me in the studio has been Gareth Wallace, the Executive Director of the Conservative Christian Fellowship, and we've been talking about Christians being actively involved in politics. If you have any questions, you can send emails to info@lovetv.co.uk. Enjoy the rest of our programs.